this list, in our number 10 spot, we have Charlene Tracy. We hear it all the time on TV and those weird medication infomercials about how important it is to keep your cholesterol under control, and they're right, it is super important to your health, but what if you never had to worry about it ever? Well, that is what people who are like Charlene Tracy don't have to worry about. Charlene was born with a mutation of the PCSK9 gene. This gene is responsible for making a protein that helps to regulate the amount of cholesterol in the bloodstream. There's a small number of the population that has a slight or single mutation of the gene, but those like Charlene have inherited the mutation from both parents, which rendered her basically incapable of developing high cholesterol. Honestly, that seems kind of like a superpower. All the cheese you want, whenever you want. What could possibly go wrong? In our number 9 spot today, we have Scott Flansburgh. Scott is a person who has an ability I think a few of us will be jealous of, and that is that he is the fastest human calculator on Earth. The guy's super good at math and has a Guinness record to show it. His talents were first recognized when he was just 9 years old, and by 10 years old his teachers were turning to him for answers. Once an MRI scan was completed, it seemed as though there might be an answer as to why Scott was able to do math in ways no one had ever seen before. There's an area of the brain that is apparently called the Brodmann Area 54, or BA44, and Scott's just happens to be 4 times the normal size. How has Scott used this ability? Rather than going on to study a bunch of higher level math, Scott aimed to figure out how he could make a difference right from the get-go, and that is why he dedicated his life to trying to help create new educational tools in order to help inspire kids to engage in the subject at the most basic level, which is not only extremely important as it's the foundation for all the lessons to come, but it's also the time when many disconnect. He also wants to start using a new calendar that he developed. We can't change the fact that there's 365 days in a year, but he thinks that we should have 13 different months, 28 days each, and 1 0 day to kick off the year. He thinks we should all start using this calendar in the year 2023. I'm not exactly sold, but I'm a sucker for how neatly that all divides. What do you guys think? In our number 8 spot today, we have Concetta Antico. For those of us that can see color, that is due to something in our eyes called cones. Mostly people have 3 cones which help to communicate with the brain in order to see colors. Some lucky few, however, were born with 4 cones, and Concetta is one of them. This percentage of the population who are like Concetta are referred to as tetrachromats, and it is said that they have the ability to see 100 million different colors. What's really interesting is that this is far more common among women than among men, so much so that for a while it was thought that men couldn't have this 4th cone. In regard to this superpower, Concetta had some words to say about the possible downsides of it as well. She said, quote, "The grocery store is a nightmare. It's like a trash pile of color coming in at every angle." Honestly, that makes a lot of sense. Having the ability to see that many colors though, you gotta ask what is her favorite of them all. In Concetta's case, it's white because she says it's peaceful and restful for her eyes. You know what they say, no rest for the tetrachromats. In our number 7 spot today, we have Rebecca Sherrick. You know when you're comfy, cozy in bed about to doze off, and then all of a sudden you remember that super embarrassing thing you said or did that one time and now you're up? Well, Rebecca has that basically all the time. She has the ability to remember every minute of her life in great detail, and she says that every time she can feel the feelings like they were new. Rebecca has what is called a highly superior autobiographical memory, and while this gives her the ability to remember everything, she also lacks the ability to forget. She says her memory starts around her first birthday, and that most of the memories are pretty mundane, like the breakfast she ate that day. She gets headaches and anxiety, and every night she has to listen to music to fall asleep, or else she is just getting constant flashbacks. Her memory is helping her with her passion, however. Rebecca wants to share her experiences across the world, and her memory helps with remembering lines for public speaking, and while sentence structure takes a little getting used to, learning foreign languages becomes much easier because all the words stick right away. Rebecca is also allowing experts to study her brain in order to try and find out what exactly gives her these extraordinary capabilities. Their hopes are that perhaps her brain could be used to find ways to help those who are afflicted by Alzheimer's, brain injury, or stroke. In our number 6 spot today, we have Derek Paravicini. Derek's story starts out when he was born very prematurely and without his sight. This began his journey of learning and experiencing the world through sound. When Derek was 18 months old, his nanny brought him some old toy organ that was a hand-me-down, and from here everyone was astounded. It turned out that Derek was able to slowly start playing the music he had heard throughout his little life on this organ. It became abundantly clear that his musical brain did not work like many of ours, and his parents thankfully purchased him a piano. Music continued to be a part of his life as he grew up, and he even used the music as a way to overcome the more difficult areas of his life. Now he has a phenomenal ability to play music he's heard, even if it is only once. He was able to play an entire piano concerto with 11,000 notes just by listening to it. Derek says that his music is what helps him connect with others, and it truly is part of his identity. In our number 5 spot today we have Jo Cameron. Jo's story is absolutely fascinating, as she didn't know exactly what made her so unique until she was 65 years old. She was receiving an operation on her arthritic hand, and this was coming just shortly after she had had a hip replacement. The doctor told her that this hand operation was going to hurt and that she'd need more painkillers than the last time, but shortly after her operation he came in to see her and she wiggled her hand right in his face, no painkillers, and more curiously, no pain. That is when it was realized that further testing needed to be done, and it was revealed that there was an abundance of anandamide in her body, which is a fatty acid neurotransmitter. This in turn caused her to not feel anxiety, fear, or pain. This has caused her to be an exceptionally happy and worry-free person, but it's also caused her to push what the rest of us would consider limits. Jo has gone on to offer her help for teams that wish to research her in hopes of one day using her exceptional difference to help develop an all-natural but actually effective pain relief. In our number 4 spot today we have Jeannie Pieper. Jeannie is a woman who was born with what is known as fibrodysplasia ossificans progressiva, or FOP. This is an extremely rare disease that is caused by a mutation in the body's repair system, which results in muscles, ligaments, and tendons hardening spontaneously or after fibrous tissues have been damaged. This usually results in joints that are permanently frozen, and it is only seen in 1 in 2 million people. Jeannie was diagnosed with this disease when she was a child, and although she was told she wouldn't live past her teenage years, she managed to not only greatly outlive those expectations, but she also allowed experts to research her, and this gave them extremely valuable insights into the disease and how to treat it. Because of Jeannie's contributions, there are now better understandings of how to possibly treat people who also experience the same thing. Although there isn't yet a cure, every piece of information is important and valuable and is one step in the direction of helping all of those with FOP. Jeannie is certainly a remarkable person. In our number 3 spot today we have Thomas. It is often said that in the American population the blood type AB negative is the rarest, with only 0.6% of the population having it, but that is in fact not true. The rarest blood type is actually one I had never heard of before, and it is called Rh null. This blood completely lacks Rh antigens, and in 1961 an Indigenous Australian became the first person discovered to have that blood type. Since then there have only been about 40 other people who have been identified as having Rh null, which makes it obviously extremely rare. Blood donation is a very important thing that helps save lives, and since this blood type is so rare, there are only about 9 active blood donors of Rh null in the world, and our friend Thomas is one of them. Having a blood type like this means that you could be the life-saving donor of another rare blood type that people need desperately, which is a large burden to bear at times, but it also comes with the risk of, when in extreme and terrible situations, that there might not be any blood to save your own life should the unfortunate circumstances arise when you need it. Rh null blood is often referred to as golden blood because it can be given to anyone. In our number 2 spot today we have Catherine and Christy Fields. Catherine and Christy are twin sisters who suffer from something known as Fields disease, which has been named after them because it appears as if they are the only 2 people in the world who have it, making it the rarest disease in the world. It is a neuromuscular disease that causes muscular degeneration. Both twins use wheelchairs to help them with mobility, and they use electronic speaking aids to help them communicate. This is something that the twins were born with, and it began being studied when they were just 4 years old in 1994. After countless tests and examinations, the doctors were unable to match it to any other known diseases, making it a complete anomaly for them. Last I could find about the twins, they were trying out Botox, which works to relax the muscles, as a potential treatment option because both women sometimes suffer from painful spasms. It must be incredibly terrifying to be going through something that has never been seen before, but Catherine and Christy and their family continue to be strong and brave and raise awareness of Fields disease. In our number 1 spot today we have Zion Clark. Sometimes you hear about people that you know you'll never forget about, and Zion is absolutely one of those people. Zion is a successful wrestler, he is a Guinness World Record holder for walking on his hands, and he is also a super optimistic person. He also just happened to be born without any legs. Zion was raised in foster care and often had to deal with bullies as well. At the age of 17, he was adopted by his mom, and this is when things really started to turn around for him. Zion was born with what is called caudal regression syndrome, and from here, he was immediately placed into foster care. Through all of the trials and tribulations he had to overcome, Zion managed to not only achieve academic success, but he became one of the best wrestlers in his state. Zion has continued his wrestling career that includes a heavy gym regime, and he has also released a book called Zion Unmatched. Someone like Zion is such a great example of a person who has overcome extreme adversity and who uses his voice to uplift others despite all of those years and people who tried to push him down. Zion truly is a one in a million kind of person. Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have Chally. Chally is a person who is diagnosed with what is called Hutchinson-Gilford progeria, most often referred to as just progeria. This is a disease that affects about 1 in every 8 million people, and basically it is a genetic mutation that causes the appearance of rapid aging. Other symptoms include things like having a limited range of motion, and unfortunately in many cases, a hardening of the arteries. Aside from being diagnosed with this rare thing, Chally is also extremely unique because of the fact that she has doubled her life expectancy by living into her 30s. Chally has detailed just a few of the struggles she went through while growing up and explained how she was teased in school, but she says it's one of the things that made her stronger. She never let the haters, the treatments, or the medication break her spirit, and those around her talk about how bright of a light she is and how much of an inspiration she is. In our number 9 spot today, we have Mackenzie Fox Byrne. Mackenzie is apparently more like 1 in almost 8 billion because it is said that he is the only person in the world with his specific genetic disorder. Mackenzie left doctors shocked when they found a mutation in his genes that they had never seen before and haven't seen since. Tests were originally conducted when Mackenzie's mom noticed that he was a little bit behind her other children in his development, and testing showed that Mackenzie in every cell has an extra part of a chromosome. Like, if we were to think of chromosomes as being made up of beads, he's just got a couple extra beads on his. Mackenzie certainly has some struggles because of this thing that makes him so unique, like how he is unable to speak, and since he is the only one to have ever been known to have this condition, there's a ton of uncertainty surrounding him, which cannot be an easy thing to go through. But despite all of that, Mackenzie is happy, kind, and loving, and it's said that he loves to snuggle and is simply just a lovely boy. In our number 8 spot today, we have Miliana Worthy. Miliana was born with something that I'm truly not sure what the odds are of happening, but it's gotta be slim. When she was born, Miliana looked a lot like her mother, and her grandmother, and her great-grandmother. As it turns out, Miliana was born with what is called poliosis, which is a condition that creates a lack of pigment in the hair and the skin surrounding it. This itself isn't the rarest condition on this list, but what is rare is that all 4 of the women, Miliana being the 4th, have the same patch of white hair in the same spot on their heads. Like, that has gotta be some kind of an anomaly, right? Miliana's great-grandmother was adopted, so it isn't quite clear if this unique quality goes back even further, but what is most peculiar is that Miliana's mom's siblings don't have the same white patch, so it really is just a luck of the genetics draw on who gets this cool little feature. Other than her unique features, Miliana is definitely a strong contender for cutest on this list. I mean, look at how sweet she was as a baby with those cute little white bangs. In our number 7 spot today, we have baby Connor. Little Connor here was born in 2012, and he was born with something that is known as thumb aplasia. When Connor's dad first saw his son in the delivery room, he began scanning his new sweet little baby, and that was when he looked at the attending pediatrician and said, "I think we have some missing digits here." As it turns out, baby Connor was born without any thumbs. This actually isn't as rare as I would have thought, as it apparently affects about 1 in every 100,000 patients, but the strange thing about it is that no one is exactly sure what causes this. Of course, Connor's parents began to worry about what Connor's life would look like because of this, and it would be irresponsible and untruthful for me to say that there would be no issues or struggles at all, but children always exceed our expectations when it comes to their ability to adapt. I mean, at the time, baby Connor had no no idea that he was born without thumbs or even what thumbs were. He just learned how to pick up objects and use his hands in his own way. Apparently what makes Connor's case even more unique is that it's uncommon for children who are born without thumbs to have 4 other fully functioning normal fingers. Doctors came up with a surgical plan, however, to create Connor a thumb, and surgery was incredibly successful. By the age of 2.5, Connor was already used to his new hands, so I can only imagine how well he's doing all these years later. And our number 6 spot today we have Spike News. Okay, I don't know who this person is, as this was just one of the coolest things that I found on Reddit, but whoever they are, they were born with a scar on their eye. A user called Spike News posted a few photos of their eye with the scar, and it literally looks like it's a black hole that's in the midst of swallowing a galaxy. It's so cool, so interesting, eyes are beautiful and strange. While this is something that can certainly cause different vision impairments and difficulties, the person who shared these images explained that they were lucky enough to be born with the scar, but without any trouble attributed to it. They said basically the only thing different is that their pupils are just different sizes, and honestly I think that's pretty cool. It's something small, but it's super unique. In our number 5 spot today we have Paul Carrison. You may have heard of Paul before because he shot to fame on the internet in 2008 due to his unique condition. He appeared on the Today Show to talk about his experience with what is called argyria. Basically, he had dermatitis on his face, and to treat it he began to take silver. For 10 years. And this argyria is the super rare condition that happens if silver builds up in your body over a long time. It can turn your skin and your eyes blue, and that is exactly what happened to Paul. Silver was a far more common treatment back in the day when we didn't really know the side effects of it because it has antibacterial properties, but in the 1930s penicillin was found to be far more effective. Paul was 62 years old in 2003 when he passed away, but it doesn't appear to have been linked to the argyria. It is said that he had a few other health problems that he had been dealing with for a few years. In our number 4 spot today we have Yu Zhenhuan. Yu actually holds a Guinness World Record for the thing that sets him apart, and the record is for being the hairiest man in the world. With over 96% of his body covered in hair, Yu had no easy time growing up. We all know how cruel people can be, and during his time growing up a lot of people teased him because of this thing that sets him apart. Yu did not let this get to him or break his spirit, however, and he became even more ambitious than he already was. He has gone on to have a career in acting, and in 2007 he started a campaign to be allowed to carry the Olympic torch at the games the following year. In our number 3 spot today we have Didi Koswara. Didi was a man from Indonesia who spent his life working as a carpenter. Unfortunately, he also suffered from a very rare disease called EV, or as many people commonly refer to it, tree man syndrome. This disease causes the human papillomavirus to grow uncontrollably, which leads to the development of growths that resemble tree bark. For a long time in his life, Didi was ridiculed for having something that he simply could not control, but thankfully in his later years that began to change. There should have never been any change that needed to be made, as no one should have ever been cruel or rude to Didi in the first place, but I'm grateful that people began treating him with kindness and that he began receiving help and treatments. Sadly, in 2016, Didi passed away at the age of 44 due to some health problems that all related back to his condition. It's important that we remember him and what he went through, because although his condition is extremely rare, that doesn't mean he is the only person who has had it. It's important to remember to treat other people with kindness. In our number 2 spot today we have Tom Staniford. Tom Staniford is an English paracyclist, and in 2011 he won the National Paracycling Circuit race, and he also has what is known as MDP syndrome. This is an extremely rare metabolic disorder that causes fatty tissue to not be able to be stored underneath the skin. As of December 2014, there were less than 12 cases of MDP syndrome ever diagnosed. Tom has a connective tissue disorder that affects his hands and feet. He also has poor flexibility in his limbs. He has type 2 diabetes as well as moderate hearing loss in both ears. What I'm trying to say is that Tom may have been dealt a difficult hand in life, but he really did not let that stop him one bit. Other than being a successful cyclist, he is also a super successful academic and an inspiration. In our number 1 spot today we have Zanziman Eli. Zanziman is from Rwanda, and he was born with something called microcephaly, which is essentially where a baby is born with a small head. There are varying degrees of this condition, but sometimes the cause for the small small head is because the brain didn't quite develop properly or because it stopped growing after birth. Because of his unique appearance and other differences, this has led people in his town to treat him as sort of a social outcast. This has led Zanziman to spend his free time retreating to the forest on his own. He very clearly loves to run and play and is fascinated with the things he's seeing around him. It's like his happy place. Because Zanziman cannot speak and has trouble hearing, he hasn't had access to education for most of his life, but that is said to have changed a few years ago after more people heard about him and his story. Afrimax, which is an African-based online channel, filmed a documentary on Zanziman and his mom, who are both incredible people. There was a GoFundMe attached with the documentary, and with donations from all over the world, it is said that Zanziman has now been enrolled at a special needs school where he has made new friends. Zanziman is truly one in a million, and his sweet spirit is so clearly seen by those who surround him.
Starting off this countdown, we have Anna Chapman. Okay, this story always shocked me. So Anna Chapman tricked people into thinking that she was a high-flying socialite. She had people convinced that she owned her own successful real estate business, but it was all a lie. In reality, she was a Russian spy. And that rhymed. She was sent to America from Russia to get insider info, but she was arrested in June of 2010 after a Russian government official tipped off the US. In July, her and the other Russian spies were all sent back to Russia. But Anna kept her identity. Anna might not even be her real name, but now she hosts her own television show and she's a model. Moving on to number 9, we have the Con Man. And here's your little reminder to hit that thumbs up button because it really helps us out. So this next individual shared the time he found out that his roommate had a double life as a con man. So when this guy was younger, he shared a house with a bunch of people. His close friend, his brother, and just some other random people he didn't really know. He compared it to living in a frat house, except they weren't part of a college or university. In the end, sharing it with that many people just made it more feasible. One of the guys that lived in their house worked as a port in customs, or so he said. He had a uniform, ID, and everything. Then a year later, he kept buying discounted TVs and merchandise. He claimed he got it from work because it was part of unclaimed packages. Then one day the roommate just left after he scammed a different roommate. Turns out he was just a big con man. He never worked at the port and he was going by a fake name and identity. To this day, they don't know who he truly is and how he made his money. Like, just imagine living with a stranger for years. That is so creepy. Moving on to number 8, we have Frank Abagnale Jr. This dude is crazy. He was a massive con artist and forger. In fact, his story was so big that it was adapted into the movie Catch Me If You Can, where Leonardo DiCaprio starred as Frank. So Frank managed to scam millions of dollars from banks through check fraud across 26 countries. He did this all within 5 years. He started doing it at only 16 years old. While traveling the world, Frank would take on fake identities. He successfully managed to convince people that he was a pilot, doctor, and lawyer. In total, he had about 8 different identities, and FBI had the hardest time tracking him down. In fact, he managed to escape from police custody twice. Now, he was eventually caught, but he kinda got off easy. He served fewer than 5 years in prison, and then he started working for the government. He is currently a consultant and lecturer for the FBI Academy and field offices, and runs his own financial fraud consultancy company. But this dude literally had multiple identities, and people believed each and every one. In our 7th spot, we have Gary Thompson. Gary Thompson made his living from panhandling. It would make him over $100,000 a year. He would go around begging for money in a wheelchair while slurring his speech. People often felt sorry for him and would give him money. Here's the thing, it was all an act. Now, Gary was once in a car accident several years ago, and he did get hurt, but he recovered, hence why he had access to a wheelchair. He also received over $2 million for the accident. So why is he out panhandling? Well, he blew it all. He liked having money, but he also liked doing nothing, so he decided to become a beggar. To him, it's easy money, and at the same time, he can receive sympathy. Imagine having $2 million and just like, pfft, so stupid. Coming in at number 6, we have the student teacher. This story was shared by Reddit user Magana. According to her, she had a student teacher in her high school biology class. She was very sweet and soft-spoken. Then one day she just stopped showing up to class. People were wondering what became of her. And that's when the rumors started. People were talking about her being arrested for making and selling drugs, which was super out of character for this sweet, innocent student teacher. But a week later, the local news released a story about the student teacher being arrested. So during the day, she was a nice, friendly student teacher at a high school. At night, she was cooking and selling illegal drugs. We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with John Wayne Gacy. John Wayne Gacy was an American serial killer who was given the name the Killer Clown. Why is that? Well, during the day, he would dress up as Pogo the Clown for neighborhood events or children's parties. People knew him as the Clown Guy. Little did they know, he had a very dark side. See, this is one of the many reasons why clowns terrify me. Over the years, Gacy took the lives of 33 individuals. They were found buried all around his house. Thankfully, he was caught in 1978, but still his run lasted way too long. In our 4th spot, we have Wild Brian. During the day, this next individual was a gas technician, but at night he would pretend to be homeless and go by the name Wild Brian. So during the day, as a gas technician, he would work on, install, and fix furnaces. Seems like a pretty ordinary dude, right? With lots of field experience. But get this, at night he would roam the streets and pretend to be homeless. I don't know why he would do this because he had a home. But he would go out and try to gain sympathy from people. When people would ignore him, he would chase them down the street and throw his boots at them. But wait, he gets crazier. You can often find him hanging out at parks, just creepily swinging on the swings, or rocking on the seesaw up and down by himself. He was caught when one of his clients saw him sitting at a corner panhandling. So yeah, this dude literally had a crazed alter ego of a homeless man. Moving on to number 3, we have Jane Toppin. Jane Toppin was a medical nurse, but you wouldn't want to ever be under her care. Why? Well, she was also a serial killer. She was fascinated with death. She would pose as a sweet and caring nurse, but in reality, she would experiment and kill her patients. One time, she gave her patients different drugs to see what the drugs would do to them. She also had a tendency to push her patients right to the edge of death and then bring them back to life and then back to death. In 1885, she was banned from nursing school after 2 of her patients mysteriously died while in her care. Also, they learned that she had an unhealthy obsession with autopsies. But that didn't stop her. She ended up forging her nursing certificates and began her own private home care. Jane was arrested in 1901 and admitted to taking the lives of 31 individuals. In our 2nd spot, we have Jonathan Wild. Okay, this dude is literally wild, okay? So he ran a successful group of thieves, while at the same time he was a public figure who would be like, oh god, I hate thieves. He literally made the public believe that he was a crime fighter set out to stop the thieves. He was even named the Thief Taker General. He had everyone fooled. So his group of thieves would steal goods, and then Jonathan would say that he found the stolen items, and then he would collect the reward. In some cases, he would often blackmail others for money. So not only would he be a hero for returning the stolen items, but he also would get a lot of money while doing so. He successfully pulled this off for 7 years before finally getting caught. But damn, this dude deserved an Oscar for his performance. He had everyone fooled. And in our number 1 spot, we have John Leonard Orr. John Leonard Orr worked as a firefighter for the Glendale Fire Department in Southern California. In fact, he was so good at what he did that he eventually got promoted to fire captain and then arson investigator. But what others didn't know is that he was a pyromaniac, an arsonist. He took his knowledge of being an arson investigator to prevent police and firemen from ever catching him. Since he knew what they were searching for, he could cover his tracks perfectly. Also, there were times where he would be investigating his own crimes, so he would get away with them. In the end, it was found that he started over 2,000 fires, causing millions of dollars in damages. In 1984, he started a fire at an improvement store. Sadly, 4 people lost their lives in this incident. The fire department deemed it was an electrical fire, but he was adamant it was arson. That's because he's the one that started the fire and he felt guilty. So this raised some eyebrows. Then he even wrote a novel titled Points of Origin, and it was about a fireman. It was also an arsonist. Again, it's like he wanted to be caught. Now, he was caught in 1987 when he left behind a fingerprint in a store he attempted to burn down.